Former Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, appeared on Face the Nation and didn't rule out running third party on the no labels ticket for president in 2024. And we have to circle back to this so that I can clearly say once again why this is such a horrible, terrible idea. Before discussing further, I will show you this little clip from this interview. The context, in case you missed some of this, is there's a third-party group called No Labels, and Joe Manchin is considering a third-party run in the 2024 presidential election on that ticket. Larry Hogan is one of the co-chairs of this organization, and I guess he also is not ruling out that option. And what I've heard him say, and you'll hear him reference this in this moment, is if it's Trump versus Biden again, which is going to be most likely, then yeah, No Labels is going to have to really heavily consider a third-party run. They advertise themselves to be kind of in the middle, centrist, getting past the division. But again, I'll address all of that after this.
There's concern, especially among allies of the White House, that a Democratic independent ticket would pull from Biden. But let's be real. If Trump is going to end up, looks like the nominee come January or February of next year, are you, Larry Hogan, open to being atop a no labels ticket as a Republican type candidate with no labels?
It's not something I'm pursuing.
I know it's not. We know you're not pursuing it. But is it at
I'm
least
hoping we don't
door?
get to that point. I have not closed the door to that. If I believe that we can actually win the race, we have a strong ticket, that those two major candidates are weak, we might have to try to pull off something that's never been done, which is sort of what I did in Maryland.
There's concern.
So it's just not the case that in our current political structure and partisan environment, a third-party candidate would be able to be victorious in a national election, especially when No Labels would be running its first national presidential election. That's just not going to happen. But what could happen is someone like Joe Manchin or Larry Hogan could siphon away necessary votes from Joe Biden's candidacy and hand the election to Donald Trump. And they are willing to call out the threat of Donald Trump to democracy, to our Constitution, but then are considering doing something that could potentially help his candidacy. It's wild. And I want to say again, their whole mission kind of plays into the idea that the extremism that is present in American politics is at the same magnitude on both sides, and thus you got to split the difference. And you're going to have to pick a candidate in between Trump and Biden or something like that. That is incredibly inaccurate and dishonest to play into that, because if you're wanting a moderate candidate based on our current political spectrum and polling on all these different issues and the voting that we see, the moderate option that kind of splits the difference of the country and is in the middle of the country is Joe Biden. No matter how much right-wing media says otherwise, it is Joe Biden. And he happens to be in the Democratic Party because right now the Democratic Party is taking up most of the moderate part of our political spectrum. But it is Joe Biden. And so then they're saying not that they should be the moderate option, but that they should be in between the super extreme option and the moderate option. Why? Why would you want to split the difference between really extreme and moderate? Why not just pick moderate? And a lot of people reject that because of the two-sided framework that if we're in a divided environment, then and there are two major parties, then being in between the two parties would be the correct choice, right? But not when one of the parties isn't having extremists make it to positions of power. That's not happening. You don't have a Marjorie Greene on the left. You don't have an equivalent. But one of the parties is being occupied by a lot of actual extremists. And thus, in this moment, it is moderate, it is middle of the road, it is reasonable to side with one of the two major parties. I happen to be more progressive within that party, but even if you're not, it still would be more in line with the moderate stance on American politics to go with Joe Biden and a lot of these Democratic candidates over the extremism that, again, is not just out on social media as we see across the political spectrum, but is making it to positions of power within the Republican Party, which is the relevant part to our political conversation. And so Larry Hogan kind of distracts from that and makes it seem like the problem is equal on both sides by saying I should split the difference between the two sides, all while having to realize he couldn't actually win and thus only would serve as a potential spoiler candidate for Joe Biden. And maybe it wouldn't work out that way, but it could. And that's the danger. And it's also the danger with someone like Cornel West. As the Brookings Institute reports on, it's much too early to assess the impact of this dual threat, but the early signs are not encouraging for Biden. A recent poll by Echelon Insights, a Republican-leaning survey research firm, found that while Biden would narrowly defeat Donald Trump in a rematch of the 2020 contest, Cornel West would receive 4% of the vote in a three-way race, giving the edge to Trump. West would draw about 3/4 of his support from potential Biden voters, especially blacks, young people, and voters with graduate degrees. So if you're not familiar, Cornel West is the third-party Green Party candidate who's running right now for president, and he's to Biden's left. He is more progressive than Biden, so he would be likely taking people who could have voted for the Democratic Party candidate being Biden, but instead have voted for Cornel West, and at least according to that poll, would be handing the election to Donald Trump. And so anyone supporting the idea of Cornel West staying in until the general election has to contend with that. It seems to violate the principles you purport to have, but that's what is being said there. If Cornel West is not just going to do this for a while and then drop out before the general, if he's staying in until the general election, he is saying he's okay with handing the election to Donald Trump, which is a horrible prospect. And again, seems to be against what people like Cornel West stand for. But we'll see, whether it be Larry Hogan, Joe Manchin, or Cornel West. I really do encourage all of them to not allow for that very devastating potential situation. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before all the clips are able to be uploaded to the YouTube channel, plus get the bonus show on the weekends, you can do so by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. That's lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and there's a link in the description.